The weeks following his election, he cancelled every single transport project that was in development, extending the DLR out to Barking, the tram up to Crystal Palace, the Cross River tram from Camden and Islington down to Peckham and Brixton, a whole range of smaller schemes. The only thing that wasn't contractually committed he carried on with was the bike hire scheme, and everything else was stopped. And therefore, when you come to look at the importance of investment in lifting a country out of recession, putting people back to work, generating the sort of wealth that allows you to pay off the debts that we had to build up in order to prevent the collapse of the banking system, he's actually undermined London's chances of growth. Things like Crossrail, which were contractually committed, because I can go to the end of the road here, you'll see a bloody great hole where they're building the new Crossrail station at Tottenham Court Road, and same at Farringdon. All that's going ahead. But everything else was stopped. At the same time, fare increases. There was an independent analysis by the Independent newspaper in the run-up to the mayoral election in 2008, looked at the record. And they concluded, so this was independent, not TfL propaganda or Labour Party pamphlet, that bus fares in real terms had declined by 9% during the 8 years I was mayor, and underground fares had gone up by 1.5% in real terms, and that increase was done to pay for the extension of the East London line down to Croydon and the upgrade of the North London line and so on. But since then, we've had absolutely savage increases in real terms, one after another. And the government has now formally adopted a policy of fares on the trains going up by 3% in real terms. That's on top of whatever inflation is. We already have the highest fares in the world. London has the highest fares of any major city in the Western world. And if you actually compare our overland train service, you get on a train in France or Spain or Germany, the fares are about half what they are here in this country. In a sense, fares have become a sort of stealth tax, a bit like after they privatised the electricity and the gas and BT, all the charges went up. Whilst Thatcher would say, oh, we're holding down income tax. Yes, but they just actually got it back another way. Instead of a progressive income tax where rich people paid more than poor people, all those basic services you have to have saw a dramatic turnaround increase in terms of what you were paying. So, Boris can't distance himself from this government. He's a hard-line right-winger who gets away with murder because of all the shambling charm and the good jokes and all that. If we fail to take City Hall back for the Labour Party and for Londoners, it will be seen as a devastating blow to the Labour Party and the trade unions. It will give the Tories a confidence to roll forward more aggressively. And a huge amount is going to be at stake. Now, if you look at who funded Boris's campaign 2.5 years ago, the biggest single contributors were the hedge funds, which is why he's stridently opposing any regulation of private equity firms, the hedge funds. The very worst elements of capitalism were the ones that poured the most into his campaign, and they will pour it in again. He will not want for money, and he will not want for the support of central government, whatever the tensions and petty hatreds and jealousies there are at the top of the Tory party. What they don't want is a socialist administration at City Hall fighting this government line by line and cut by cut. So I'm absolutely clear about this, and it was a clear choice that the Labour Party faced between me and Una King. I made absolutely clear, while she talked about we have to live in the real world, we have to look at accommodations, my clear view is clear. We make that election in 18 months a referendum against the cuts. We will already have had the first 2 tranches of the cuts. The ones that the government pushed through when it got elected back in July, the group of cuts that are just about to come in April, massive cutbacks in police numbers and virtually every aspect of the public service, and clearly a close move, but very confused and well hidden, towards really deconstructing the NHS with these American health providers coming in and GPs being given the role of commissioning and all of that. So I will be running on saying this has got to stop, and seeking an honest mandate, because this government hasn't got an honest mandate for these cuts. Cameron on the Andrew Marr programme, the last appearance on Andrew Marr before the election a few days later, said on that programme, if ministers come to me with cuts in frontline services, they will be sent away. It was a lie, straightforward. They were planning this, and they've seized the chance of the general worry the public have about the scale of debt that's been built up to try and make changes that even Thatcher could only dream about. And of course, in Thatcher's government, she inherited a government with a lot of old sort of wet Tories and One Nation Tories. There are no One Nation wet Tories in this lot. These are Thatcher's children, totally committed to finally making the changes that she set in place 30 years ago. What they want to see is Britain more like America, a much smaller state, much more of a private sector, even weaker trade unions, and a complete free-for-all in terms of deregulation and a low rate of top tax so that the rich do better and better. And that's why it's absolutely crucial. It isn't just about winning City Hall, it's actually winning the economic argument. All my life, I've watched the Labour Party throw away the chance of winning a general election because its economic policy unravelled during the intensity of the election campaign. And to give Gordon Brown his due, although it was encapsulated in what seemed like a trivially short slogan, Tory cuts versus Labour investment, that actually is the core of the economic policy we need to generate. When the Attlee government came to power in 1945, the scale of debt was 3 times, in real terms, the scale of debt we face today. The Attlee government took a decision to pay it off over 60 years and to go ahead with building a welfare state, rebuilding our industrial base, clawing back the markets that have been lost during the Second World War, and it gave my generation the best quality of life of any people in these islands since humans first actually came to them. And now we're able to contrast that with what happened with the 30 years of the Thatcher-Reagan neoliberal experiment. In all those years, in that great post-war consensus, growth was higher than during the Thatcher-Reagan years, these last 30 years. Investment was higher. So all that nonsense that Thatcher and Reagan came out with, break the power of trade unions, deregulate business, go for a flat tax system, great inequalities of wealth, and the rich will lead a cascade of investment and the wealth will trickle down. Investment levels have been devastated in Britain and America, which were the most extreme in carrying this forward, and to a lesser extent in the other European countries that got dragged along and so on. And investment's the key. As the Attlee government realised, you can't get out of a crisis like this by cutting public spending. Ireland started 18 months before this government. We see the crisis they're in. They made the most savage cuts. And what happened? I mean, the charges they're having to pay to continue borrowing have gone up and up and up because the bond markets aren't fools. They see the Irish government throwing many people out of work. They're not paying tax. They're not generating growth in GDP. And they're taking benefits, even those benefits have been reduced. So the chance of paying back the debt gets less. And that is exactly what's beginning to happen here. This week, the International Monetary Fund, the Organisation of Economic Cooperation and Development, the sort of Western capitalist club, revised down their figures for growth in the British economy.